The Boscombe Valley Mystery. Chapter 1. A Telegram from the Country. It was a quiet morning in London. I was sitting by the window in Baker Street, reading the newspaper. My friend, Sherlock Holmes, came into the room. He had his coat on and was carrying a small suitcase. "Watson, can you come with me to Herefordshire?" he asked. I received a telegram from Inspector Lestrade of Scotland Yard. A man named Charles McCarthy has been murdered near Boscombe Pool. The police have arrested his son, James. "That sounds terrible," I said. "Does Lestrade think James is guilty?" "Everyone thinks he is guilty," Holmes replied, looking at his pocket watch. "The evidence against the young man is very strong. But I want to see the place myself. We have 20 minutes to catch the train at Paddington Station." An hour later, we were sitting on the train, travelling through the green English countryside. Holmes opened a packet of papers and began to read. "Let me tell you the story, Watson," Holmes said, looking up from his notes. "John Turner is a very rich man who lives at Boscombe Valley. He made his money many years ago in Australia. He owns large fields and houses. Charles McCarthy was also an Australian, but he was not rich. Turner allowed McCarthy to live on one of his farms without paying rent." "Did they know each other in Australia?" I asked. "Yes," Holmes said. "They were old friends. But last Monday, Charles McCarthy left his house at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He walked down to Boscombe Pool, a small lake in the woods. He told his servant that he had an important meeting at 4 o'clock. Who was he meeting? "We don't know," said Holmes. "But a young girl saw McCarthy walking toward the pool. A few minutes later, she saw his son, James McCarthy, walking in the same direction. He was carrying a gun. Then the girl saw father and son arguing angrily near the water." "And what happened next?" I asked. "The girl was frightened and ran home to tell her mother. Less than an hour later, James McCarthy ran to the lodge keeper's house. He was covered in blood. He said he found his father dead in the forest near the pool." "It seems very clear," I remarked. "The son killed the father." Holmes shook his head slowly. "Circumstantial evidence can be very misleading, Watson. It may seem to point straight at one thing, but if you look closer, it might point to something completely different." Chapter 2. The Mystery at the Pool. When we arrived at the town, we met Inspector Lestrade at the local inn. He looked very pleased with himself. "The case is solved, Mr. Holmes," Lestrade said with a smile. "James McCarthy killed his father. He refuses to tell us what they were arguing about, and his story about what happened makes no sense at all." "What is his story?" Holmes asked. "James says he was hunting in the woods when he heard someone call out, 'Cooey!' which is an Australian signal. He thought it was his father, so he ran to the pool. He found his father lying on the ground with his head crushed by a heavy weapon. James claims he saw a grey coat lying on the ground nearby, but when he looked up, it was gone." "Did you find the weapon?" Holmes asked. "Yes. We found a large, heavy stone covered in blood near the body," Lestrade answered. "Can I speak to young McCarthy?" Holmes requested. We went to the local prison to meet James McCarthy. He was a handsome young man, but his face looked pale and tired. "Mr. Holmes, I did not kill my father," James said quietly. "We did argue that afternoon, but I left him alive. I heard him call 'Cooey' and turned back. When I reached him, he was dying. His last words were about a rat. A rat? I repeated. Yes, James said. He whispered something about a rat, but I didn't understand. Then he died in my arms. Thank you, Mr. McCarthy, Holmes said. I believe you are telling the truth. The next morning, Holmes and I walked to Boscombe Pool. The ground around the lake was wet and muddy from the recent rain. Lestrade came with us, though he clearly thought Holmes was wasting his time. Holmes immediately knelt down on the ground. He took a magnifying glass out of his pocket and began examining the mud like a hound following a scent. He walked along the bank of the pool, studying every footprint, broken branch, and crushed blade of grass. Ah! Holmes exclaimed suddenly. Look here! He pointed to a set of soft footprints in the mud near a large tree. Lestrade, you looked at the body, but you did not look at the ground, Holmes said softly. The murderer was a tall man. He walks with a limp in his left leg. He wears thick-soled boots, smokes cigars, and carries a sharp pocket knife. Lestrade laughed. I don't see any of those things, Mr. Holmes. You don't look, Holmes replied calmly. Look at these footprints. The left heel does not press as deeply as the right. That means he limps. Look at these ashes under the tree. That is Indian cigar ash. And look at this branch. It was cut cleanly with a sharp knife, not broken. Holmes then picked up a small piece of cloth from the bushes, and here is a thread from a grey coat. Chapter 3. The Secret from Australia. Later that afternoon, we were back in our room at the inn. The door opened, and a tall, heavy man entered. His hair was white, his face was pale, and he walked with a noticeable limp. It was John Turner, the rich landowner. Sit down, Mr. Turner, Holmes said gently. Turner looked at Holmes with dark, tired eyes. You know, don't you? He whispered. Yes, Holmes said. I know you were at Boscombe Pool yesterday afternoon. Turner covered his face with his hands and began to weep. I am a dying man, Mr. Holmes, he confessed. The doctors say I have only a few weeks to live, but I cannot let innocent young James go to prison for a crime I committed. Tell us what happened, Holmes urged. John Turner took a deep breath. 30 years ago in Australia, I was a highway robber. My men and I called ourselves the Ballarat Gang. One day, we attacked a wagon carrying gold. The driver of that wagon was Charles McCarthy. I looked at Holmes in surprise. I let McCarthy live, Turner continued. Years later, I returned to England, bought this land, and tried to live an honest life. But McCarthy found me. He knew my secret. He threatened to tell the police about my past unless I gave him money. So he blackmailed you? I asked. Yes, Turner said bitterly. For years I gave him money, a house and land. But last week he demanded something worse. He wanted his son James to marry my daughter Alice. Alice is my only joy, and I could not let her marry the son of a blackmailer. So you agreed to meet him at the pool? Holmes asked. McCarthy called out cooey, our old Australian signal, to call his son, but I heard it first, Turner explained. I saw McCarthy arguing with James. After James walked away, I approached McCarthy. We argued. He laughed at me and said he would destroy my family. I lost my mind. I picked up a heavy stone and struck him. And the word rat, Holmes asked. Turner smiled sadly. In Australia, Ballarat was where we operated. McCarthy must have been trying to say Ballarat to his son before he died. Holmes nodded. And the grey coat? That was mine. I dropped it when I ran away, but I came back to fetch it when James was running for help. Turner stood up slowly. Are you going to give this confession to the police, Mr. Holmes? Holmes looked at the old, dying man. You do not have long to live, Mr. Turner. I will keep your written confession. I will only use it in court if it is necessary to save James McCarthy's life. But I think I can convince the jury that the evidence against James is too weak. John Turner thanked Holmes with tears in his eyes and left the room. Epilogue. A month later, Holmes and I were back in Baker Street. James McCarthy was found not guilty, Holmes told me as he poured a cup of tea. The jury agreed that the footprint evidence near the pool proved another man was present. And what about Mr. Turner? I asked. He died peacefully in his bed 2 weeks ago, Holmes replied. His secret is safe, and young James and Alice Turner are planning to marry. Holmes picked up his violin and smiled. A curious case, Watson. It shows us once again how important small details can be.